I'm going to tell you the article type that is the best way to incorporate storytelling into your thought leadership. There's a lot of talk about storytelling in legal marketing and business development, and that's because people tend to remember stories far better than they remember information fed to them in other forms. One area that I've seen trip up attorneys and legal marketers is integrating storytelling into thought leadership. How exactly are you supposed to tell stories in your thought leadership when your thought leadership is talking about recent developments in the law or recent legislative proceedings or trends in an industry? It's hard to incorporate storytelling into that kind of thought leadership. To incorporate storytelling, shift the focus of your thought leadership to the work you and your colleagues do for your clients. Every positive result for a client is an opportunity to produce thought leadership content about how you helped achieve that result. The content would give your target audiences a sense of the strategy and tactics you used. The best way to do that is through a best practices article based on a situation a client or types of clients were facing. Your thought leadership content becomes a story of how you helped clients through their issues. Your article leads with the situation the client was facing. You're telling a story about how your client was faced with some kind of legal issue or business issue or some other issue that they needed help with. What you actually did with your strategies and your tactics, those become the best practices for solving the kinds of issues the clients were facing. You're establishing expertise and authority by proclaiming what you did to be a best practice for handling the kind of issue that our clients were facing. It might seem strange at first, but think about it. If a strategy or a tactic wasn't what you and your colleagues thought to be the best one to implement, then why did you implement it? Magically, your strategies and your tactics become best practices. In a best practices article, you're going to start off by telling a story about the client situation. That story is what draws readers in. And then you weave the story throughout the various best practices that you cover. One of our clients was facing. Our clients often faced. Then after one problem was resolved, naturally another issue bubbled up to the surface. And you walk through the best practice for that as well. You're putting the reader in your client's shoes. What were the issues? What was the situation that your clients were facing that they needed help with? Then you're switching the angle to you and your colleagues as experts, explaining what you did and why you did what you did. You're telling a story, so you're providing this information in a way that's going to be consumed more easily and be more memorable than just plain paragraphs about how you helped a client. The story you're telling is showing off to your target audiences the knowledge and wisdom you have by educating your readers about how you and your colleagues tackle particular client issues, particular client situations. Obviously, if the reader sees themselves in the client, then you are creating a connection with that reader. You are telling that reader, we're the law firm to help you with a similar issue. I'm going to guess that you're hearing this and you've got some thoughts about why this isn't going to work. So let me dispel 3 misconceptions for you. First, you might be thinking this kind of article sounds like a promotional case study. Not really. For one, you're not doing a first we did this, then we did this, next we did this, finally we did this. That's not what you're doing. And if you're doing it, you're doing a best practices article wrong. This is not a sales document. You're not talking about we. You're telling a story that educates the reader. You're telling a story about the client situation, and then you're explaining the best practices, almost in an objective but authoritative tone. You're explaining the best practices to resolve the kinds of situations your clients found themselves in, but you're not talking about how you did this and we were so smart because we did this and then we were able to do this because we know what we're doing. You're not getting into that subjective first person self high five type tone. Second, you might be thinking that because you are talking about how you handled a client situation or many client situations, you're divulging your special sauce. That's not something you should worry about here. Your special sauce is based on the knowledge you have, the wisdom and experience you bring to the table, and the client's specific situation. This kind of thought leadership article is about best practices, but you control the narrative. You need not get into the weeds in terms of the exact decisions you made or any other decisions that you don't feel comfortable discussing. You can keep this at a high level. As I said, you want to keep this to about 3 to 4 best practices. I'm willing to bet that there were more than 3 or 4 best practices that you employed to handle any client situation. So don't worry about divulging special sauce. You do not need to go too far into the weeds. That's a great segue to the third misconception people have about storytelling through best practices, thought leadership articles, that there is a concern about disclosing privileged information or confidential information. Again, you don't have to go into the details. You don't have to disclose those details that identify clients. You can discuss the situations your clients faced in a way that no one's going to be able to figure out who the client was. And of course, if you're concerned that the client might have an issue with how you handled the discussion of their matter, even when you took these precautions, you can always ask them for permission to make sure they're okay with you publishing this kind of thought leadership article focused on a situation they were involved in. Storytelling can be a challenge when it comes to law firms' thought leadership. It doesn't always seem like it's a clear connection between storytelling, as we tend to understand it, and thought leadership. But best practices thought leadership articles are the perfect medium for storytelling. You can tell a story about the difficulties that your clients face and that were eliminated by the best practices that you and your colleagues implemented. By discussing those best practices, you and your colleagues show off your knowledge and wisdom in a way that's educational and non-salesy. Because your content will lead with a story or stories, it will go down as smoothly with readers as a cool lemonade on a hot summer day. If you're interested in learning best practices for thought leadership, check out lawfirmeditorialservice.com. We have more than 450 videos, blog posts, and podcast episodes that could help you